Hello everyone and welcome to episode 16 of the Electric B2B show. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about a hugely misunderstood and misrepresented topic, and that is the topic of proposals, okay? Now, proposals are, in my opinion, they have to be one of the most underutilized and misunderstood business assets in the entire sales marketing universe in B2B, okay? So it's real important that we talk about them because proposals, especially from a marketing point of view, are usually just, the thing that sales does. And from a sales point of view, it's something that is in a lot of companies just often checked off and viewed as a necessary evil that, people work on, and it's a numbers game because you send out X and then you get maybe 17% of them accepted. And in many places, it's really not viewed and used as the strategic asset that it is. Okay, so that's why it is super important that we talk about proposals and the right way to do them. So in today's episode, I'm going to tell you a true story with my previous company and how I really got into the world of proposals, and when the big aha moment was for me that, oh my gosh, holy crap, this really is such an underutilized asset and opportunity to send proposals. And we're also going to go into the 5 commandments of generating and doing proposals right, okay? Now, this is a primer on proposals, so it's a much deeper topic, and whenever we work with clients at Clear, it's usually in the second or third month that we really go into how they use proposals and how they should be doing it. And proposals are not a document, they're a strategy, and there's a process to using them. So whenever we talk about proposals, we actually mean the entire process of taking a prospect from a late stage in the pipeline all the way to getting them to sign the offer. So it's that last mile in the pipeline where proposals play an important role. But again, view it as a strategy, as a strategic asset, and view it as a process and not just the document that you shoot off in the email, okay? Now, true story. With a previous company of mine, we wanted to build a big ass fancy marketing automation funnel, okay? So this funnel included video, it included automated emails, it included text messages, and we just thought, okay, we probably could do it with automation in-house, but we just didn't want to mess with it. So what we did was that we created a brief and shot it off to 18 agencies and see what they would come up with and what they would recommend and how they would work with us. And truth be told, at the time, we didn't really know much about how to do proposals right. So we were a company ourselves who would, fire off proposals, just upon request. So, whenever somebody wanted a quote from us, we would sit down and after giving it some minimal consideration, we would write this lengthy document in the totally wrong way. And so we used to mess this up ourselves. So we didn't know, but when we RFQ'd this marketing automation funnel, we realized that we were doing this the wrong way, okay? So what happened was that we sent out this RFQ to about 18 agencies, and almost without exception, everybody got back to us with a quote. And that quote would be embedded in a fancy, colorful PDF that talked all about the company. And very few of these companies, maybe about 3 or 4 of the 18 companies, bothered to actually give us a call and ask a few questions about the process and the greater context, the business context of this whole project. And so, we ended up getting a lot of quotes with proposals, and we were just scratching our heads, and none of them felt right. None of them felt that, we didn't feel that anyone could really understand the whole thing and would carry this through and drive the project. And we just felt that we probably wouldn't be satisfied in the end, and we just decided to do it in-house. By the way, we simplified the entire funnel because that was a lesson that we learned later on, that you shouldn't have overcomplicated automation, okay? And a lot of time, easy is much better, according to the KISS. A lot of times, easy does it. So keep it simple, stupid, right? So this process taught us that there's something fundamentally wrong with the way service companies are doing proposals. And then later on, we learned that there are actually quite a few things that they are doing wrong, okay? One thing about proposals is that they, again, we mentioned this, that they're strategic assets, so they need to contain and reflect and echo key pieces of your marketing and your positioning and your strategy, okay? Because often we see this great big divide that a company has a very soundly built lead generation process and demand generation. They have the right things in place. And then when it comes to proposals, it's like the proposal comes from a completely different company because it's just, it talks about the company totally not using the same language that marketing uses, and then it just fires off some numbers and hopes that the client or the prospect will respond. And you know what happens to these proposals? What happens is that most often you just hear crickets because you're probably the 27th company that was asked for an RFQ and nobody replies to you. So the salesperson goes, follows up, and then just checks in, and then checks in again, and then, by the way, how are you doing? Emails and messages are sent, and it's just not a pretty thing, and certainly not something that an expertly positioned company would want to do, okay? So with that, let's jump into the 5 commandments of generating proposals, okay? Commandment number 1, don't send proposals. That's it. That's the first commandment of proposals. Don't send proposals. You're like, what? What do you mean don't send proposals? We are talking about how to do proposals right. And yes, we are. So the first and most important rule is that you don't just send a proposal. And you most certainly don't send a proposal to anybody's brother who asks for one. Okay, because proposals, number 1, they have to be conversations. So the first mistake people make when using proposals is that they create them in the first place for companies who are not researched, who the salesperson or the SDR hasn't researched properly. So they probably don't fit the ideal customer profile, and yet we create a proposal for them, wasting our time and wasting their time. And if the prospect does fit our ICP criteria, our ideal customer profile criteria, then what you do is you start a conversation, because you never ever want to send off a document without having the opportunity to check for feedback and responses and handle objections synchronously. Okay, so the proposal process, the most important part, presenting the numbers, is something that actually needs to happen in a synchronous way in an in-person meeting or a call. Okay, so that it ends up becoming a conversation rather than a one-way presentation and then waiting for feedback. It's much better for both parties. Okay, the second thing you want to have is to bring up the finance and the money question in time, because what often happens with salespeople is that they get really super deep into conversations without actually qualifying for budget. Now, budget is a tricky thing because often if you ask, okay, do you have a budget for this cybersecurity solution? And they'll be like, no, we don't have a budget for cybersecurity. We have like a firewall and we pay for McAfee, but other than that, we don't have a budget for cybersecurity, so bye. A lot of times that happens. But you actually need to figure out whether they have the capacity, whether there's enough value provided to their company for them to actually bring in that amount of money which you need in order to do a good job. Okay, so stated simpler, you need to qualify for the money question in time, because you're wasting everybody's time if you don't do that. And a lot of times the money question isn't even brought up till they send the proposals, which according to Commandment 1, you shouldn't send off like that without first discussing it, okay? So you bring up money in time and in a live conversation, right? Third commandment, have a payment plan, okay? And this states that instead of the question being, do you accept the proposal or not, you have a plan A or a plan B, because it's a much better choice to make rather than a yes or no, whether it be A or B. And the easiest way to have an A or B option is to have 2 payment plans. Either you have 2 variations or 3 variations of your service, so you can have a starter, a medium, and a professional package, whatever those entail. Or you can have payment plans, like you can have like an X amount of dollars up front, or you can have 3 payments of Y, or something of that nature. And if you have a payment plan, it makes the terms much friendlier. And again, it's easier to choose between the payment plans. It's better that your prospect starts lamenting whether or not which payment plan is right for them versus choosing whether they accept the thing in the first place or no. Okay? All right, the fourth commandment of creating great proposals is that the hero is the buyer. And so many companies mess this up because they think that in a proposal, all they have to do is brag about themselves and prove how awesome they are. Because the logic behind this is that if they say really big things about themselves and then if they impress the crap out of the prospect, then they will end up buying from them, and that will also justify the price. Now, what the good companies do, or the companies who get proposals right do, is that they make the hero of the proposal the buyer. So what they do is that they show a super high amount of empathy in the form of understanding and articulating the buyer's problem and the greater context of the problem. And so the hero ends up being the buyer themselves. So when the buyer views the proposals and reads it, then they will feel that the supplier really understands them and that they are in good hands. Okay, so show empathy in the form of articulating the problem of the buyer really precisely and making yourself not the hero, but the guide who will help your buyer on that journey. Okay, and the fifth commandment of successful proposals is don't do free consulting, right? Because a lot of times what happens is that in order for you to sell a project, you'll have to do a considerable amount of planning up front. And what often happens with professional service companies is that they invest their 20, 40, 60 hours without getting paid into creating this plan. And that's just plain wrong. It's just not fair, okay? So the very first thing you should be selling in the case of a lot of professional services is actually an audit or a plan or some sort of a preparatory project where you really understand the situation and the problem and you assess what it is that needs to be done and you create a plan or a roadmap or a strategy or whatever. Now, do not do this work for free because it's just not fair. It will devoid you of the expert status because if you think about it, you probably want to position your company as an expert in your field, as a highly regarded expert. And highly regarded and highly paid experts don't do free consultation because it's just not the way that the world works. Okay? So no free consultations. There you have it. These are the 5 commandments of successful proposals. Number 1, don't write them, but talk about them. Number 2, talk about money in time. Number 3, have a payment plan. Number 4, make the hero of your proposal the buyer instead of your company. And number 5, don't do free consulting. There you have it, and thanks for watching this episode, and we will see you later in the Electric B2B show. Bye-bye.